We're talking to you today from the lovely city of Oslo, where it's now well past 10 o'clock. So thanks for staying up late and joining us. But you are the host of the Passwords12 conference, which is going on this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, right?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about Passwords12. This is the third year, I think, that you've done it.
Yeah, I've done it twice before actually in my home city, pretty much in Bergen on the west coast of Norway. This time we do it in the capital of Norway, in Oslo, at the University Department of Informatics. It's not a free conference. It's open for everyone to attend, but it's nothing commercial. We're not supposed to make any money of it. We actually have received some of the money from the National Science Department, more or less, and part of the Norwegian government. And it's believe it or not, it's actually 3 days about nothing but passwords and PIN codes.
Wow. Okay, this is a topic that's been getting a lot of attention all this year, really. There have been editorials that have come out and said, you know, that the passwords are passe, that we should be moving away from them. Obviously, we've had a lot of passwords leaked and then analyzed after they've been leaked, going back the past 3 or 4 years with some of these huge password dumps. What are the big topics at Passwords12 this year around password security?
Well, I told the audience today, when we did, after our official program, we also did several rump sessions during the afternoon and evening, and I can for sure say that this year we have lots of speakers talking about cracking passwords, how we can do that faster than anyone have been able to do before.
Right.
And that has to do both with, you know, an increase in brute forcing capacity, but it also has to do with us understanding more on how I could almost say how your brain works and how you select and how you change your passwords, and also back to the never-ending topic of also service providers not doing a good enough job on how to protect your password. So there's a high focus this year on cracking passwords.
And any new or novel approaches to doing that? I know that, you know, there's been a lot about leveraging cloud resources and GPU clusters on Amazon and so on to give really individuals the power that used to be available really only to governments. But are there any new techniques or approaches to password cracking coming out of Passwords12 this year?
Yes, absolutely. One of the evening talks we had today was from a gentleman from the US, actually, named Jeremy Gosney, and he's the one who did, I would say, the definite write-up on the LinkedIn leak in June. I was the one, you know, who went to the media and told more or less the world that LinkedIn had been hacked. But Jeremy, he cracked approximately 94% of all the passwords that got leaked, pretty close to 6 million passwords, and he analyzed them. And to this evening, he made a presentation where he's actually using InfiniBand for 10 and 20 gigabit Ethernet connections between a cluster solution where he's actually clustering GPUs, not the operating systems. He's only clustering the GPUs. So he have actually got, I think it was 25 GPUs now used to brute force different password hash algorithms.
Wow.
Now, to a normal individual, that means that if you have an old Windows XP computer, like many companies still have, and you have what's called an LM hash, whatever combination you're using on your keyboard, up and including length 14.
14-character password.
Yeah, 14 characters. He would crack it in 6 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
So passwords on Windows XP, not good enough anymore.
Right, right. There have been discussions about what to do what companies can do, given that there's an arm race going on, and as you're saying, that a lot of the technology, a lot of the even the standards that they've been using to have secure passwords are falling now, as individuals get access to more and more compute power. So what should companies be thinking about if you are one of those companies out there that's still using Windows XP? You're probably not requiring 14-digit password, 14-character password. So what's a proper response?
Well, there are some things that really actually that is very important to us to differentiate between. You have online attacks and there are offline attacks. And for an online attack, it will, the basic explanation of an online attack is some guy sitting down at a computer and trying to log into your Facebook account, and he knows already your email address, which is your login name, and then will type out one password after another and try to see if he can get access. It's a very slow attack, and even if you do some automation, it will be very, very difficult to do more than a couple of attempts per second, maybe 10 attempts, maybe 100 attempts per second, which is incredibly slow. For an offline attack, somebody will actually steal your entire database, like what happened with LinkedIn, pretty much. And then they get access to what is called hashed passwords. And then you are free from all restrictions on speed and stuff like that. It's just a question of money and hardware, and then you can crack it at insane speeds, and there's nothing between you and number of attempts that you can do. So in an online world, what's important for companies to do is to do rate limiting. That is simply like, you want to log into Facebook, and the first time you go to the Facebook web page, you will type in your username and your password, and if you happen to misspell your password, as an example, Facebook will tell you to wait for 100 milliseconds, 0.1 second, before you can type in your new password again. Now, you won't notice that, and they won't tell you because, 0.1 second, nothing. So you will type in your password a second time, and if you then misspell it as well, they could increase that 0.1 second into 1 second. And the next time you mistype it, then they will increase it to 3 seconds. Now, for you, that shouldn't be a problem. But for an attacker doing an online attack, that will make things more and more difficult, because then you have to succeed within 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attempts.
Right, and if you're trying to do hundreds of thousands of attempts,
then you could be able to do 10 attempts per second.
Mm-hmm.
So for each and every time you fail, the higher you have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple.
That sounds like a simple fix, yeah.
Yeah. But for offline attacks, the story is something completely different, because then you can't do anything that looks like rate limiting. What you need to do then is to use really incredibly good password storage hash algorithms. And the normal hash algorithm is something that you will use with really high speed, because you would do it to verify a message. And that is something that you want to do as fast as possible. I will send you a message, and you need some way to verify that, and we can generate a hash value on my side. I will send you a file, and I will tell you through a side channel, a text message, email, anything, that the file that you got now, if you calculate a hash on your side, and you receive the same hash value as I did when I generated it, then nothing have been manipulated with this file. Right. And that's a function that you want to do as fast as possible. But for password hashes, you don't want speed. You want them to be as slow as possible. And this is due to the number of attempts per second you can do. And this has to do with hardware. So, a very slow cracking speed is to do less than 1 million attempts per second. A really high speed is to do like 1 billion attempts per second. That's really high speed. And in the new Microsoft Office 2013, that is, in beta version now and coming out very soon, the attack speeds there with hardware today will actually mean that we can do maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 attempts per second. And that is insanely slow. Right. And that's really good.
Right. So rather than really just trying to, for the online attacks, just trying to slow the attackers down, take simple measures that would not be noticeable to a human being, but that would make online attacks very difficult. And then for the offline attacks, really in using much more difficult to crack encryption on the password hashes themselves to create the password hashes. Right. One of the problems that we're getting, that in addition to the fact that the attackers have more firepower to break passwords, obviously is a behavioral problem, which is password reuse, right? Which is you get somebody's LinkedIn password, you may also have their VPN password or their password to their online banking account or something of that nature. Anything you're hearing on that issue at Passwords12, the conference that you're hosting right now in Oslo?
Well, we still have 2 days to go, but yeah, I mean the discussions are already there, and again, at this conference, just like we should do anywhere else, is that we are aware of the problem that people will be reusing their passwords, and you know, as a service provider, if I haven't, you know, any kind of service online, if I was the, you know, if I was the owner of Facebook, or if I was just running a very small web shop here in Norway, you know, you really can't charge me for if somebody broke into my system and got hold of your password. You can't really complain if you were using the same password at other sites as well. You know, it's I can't do anything to prevent that. It's completely impossible. So one of the challenges that we are facing is that today, as you know, consumers, you and me, is that when you register for some website or service today, they're not telling you how they are actually storing the password.
Right.
It could be in plain text, and the easiest way to spot that is that if your provider will send you an email with your password in, maybe also including your username or something else. But if they do send you an email with your password, then that is not a service provider you ever want to use or trust at all, period. You shouldn't use them, seriously.
Because that means they've got your password somewhere on their systems in plain text, that they don't have a hash of it. Most companies shouldn't be storing your password, just the hash equivalent of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is, I mean, in the 1970s, security people were saying you should not store passwords in plain text.
Right.
There are still companies that do. Governmental organizations are also doing that still. And the easy way to look for some of them, I mean, if you know, I would say if you want to have a good laugh, then you should go to plaintextoffenders.com. They have a collection of websites, and they are collecting them. If you find a website or some kind of service that will actually send you your password by non-encrypted standard internet email, then you can send that in as a contribution at plaintextoffenders.com.
Plaintextoffenders.com. Okay.
Yeah, and the really bad thing, there are lots of examples there, and there are coming new ones, you know, pretty much every day.
Wow. We've seen in the last couple years a lot of companies implementing multi-factor authentication, Google, Facebook among them. That would seem to address some of the issues around identity theft or account hijacking. In other words, so you're no longer relying on a single factor. But is that a cure-all? Is that is going to a second factor enough to address the security concerns around single factor passwords, single factor authentication with passwords?
Well, doing some kind of two-factor authentication is, you know, that's where we are heading, and it is something that we perhaps should have done a long time ago. But one of the problems, even still with Facebook and Google, is that it is still voluntary for you to use two-factor authentication.
Right.
And well, I haven't asked Google and Facebook, but I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of users of both Google and Facebook are still only relying on username and password. So,
Right.
if you and
Right.
I are, if you and I are the security experts, or at least we are a little bit paranoid, then most probably both of us are using two-factor authentication with Google. And that may help the two of us, but for the majority, again, using Google, they're not using two-factor authentication. They
Right.
could very, very easily become the victims of some kind of fraud, scam, break-in, anything.
Right. Right.
Two-factor two-factor authentication, yes, absolutely. That's where we should have been a long time ago.
Right. What are the changes? What are the biggest changes you've seen in the past 3 years that you've done this conference?
A massive amount of password compromises and leaks onto the internet.
Hmm.
Absolutely, no doubt. It's massive. It's crazy, and the number of password leaks every day is steadily increasing. And
Right.
the ones that
And
the ones that you haven't
those
heard about
leaks,
is,
right,
that's the top of the iceberg.
right. And those leaks also provide a resource for people who want to break other passwords, don't they? I mean, those huge data leaks then become tools via rainbow tables and so on that actually make it easier to further crack passwords. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it's what we are trying to do is we are trying to learn from these password leaks, not only to analyze the passwords and understand how people are selecting and changing their passwords, but we're also doing that so we can, implement security measures to, in a way, accept the fact that people are still being people, just like they were selecting passwords 20 years ago. They do the same thing today. But we can improve security. But in order to prove it, we also need to learn about the passwords being used. So we are using it for good. But of course, it's just like when you buy a car. The purpose of a car is to go from A to B. But if you want, you can also kill people with it.
Right.
And with all these leaked passwords, of course, the bad guys are learning even more on how are you selecting and changing your passwords. And that can be used for evil.
Right. One of the other big issues that's come up this year, and I won't keep you too long because I know it's late there, is and I actually wrote a story on this, is the way that social networks have accustomed us to using our email address as a standard user ID, that the days of each site having its own user ID and password are gone, and very commonly now people have followed sites like Facebook and allowed the email address to be a common UID, and that can present problems also in terms of profiling and trying to use features to figure out who has accounts where. Is there an easy way to, so is it better for each site to have its own unique authentication engine with a unique username and a unique password and have those both be strong, or is it better to try and move towards a unified authentication system that really is strong, but where it's gonna link many sites together?
Well, I would definitely go for the last option, and it's in a way I'm admitting that I wouldn't trust myself to make an authentication system of some sort. So I would go for
Right.
somebody else providing an identity management, password management service, because what I want to do is I would like to sell stuff online. And that's my primary purpose of setting up in any kind of shop on the internet, while the handling of verifying users, just like you would accept credit card information, is something that you would ask somebody else to do. You are selling stuff, and then you will have somebody else collect the payment, and they will get their cut off the deal, and you will get the money for your products, but they will be handling the payment transaction. And what we are seeing now is that there are actually coming up several more shops now that, in a way, they will do the user verification for you as well. And I think that's a good idea.
Right. You do or do not?
I do. I think that's a good idea for many companies that wants to get online and provide any kind of service. I think
Right.
that's a really good idea. Go to the professionals. Don't try to make it yourself.
Right. Although sometimes those third-party companies themselves are found to be not following best practices, and that can be a problem as well.
Of course, that can be a problem, and just like it's difficult or close to impossible for any of us to verify if your password is actually being stored in a secure manner with any online service today. I think it will also be, at least for many of us, it will also be difficult, at least today, to try to verify if the external ID provider or password hash provider you choose is actually really good at it.
Right. Well, last question then, and then I'll let you go because you've been great. Do you, a lot of the problems with passwords end up coming down to people choosing passwords that are easy to remember versus secure, and that's understandable, particularly when you've got a lot of different accounts that you're managing. Do you see an easy fix for that problem, or for the password insecurity problem in general going forward? Anything coming out of the conference this year that you think is, this could be a solution for the problems that we all know about, which is people reusing passwords, people picking passwords that are easy to crack, and then on the service provider side, not securing those passwords on their network properly?
I've been saying for many years already that in a way, I've stopped complaining about users, humans, selecting and changing the passwords into bad passwords. I mean, it's the way
That's
people
probably smart.
selected passwords 10 years ago is easy to say the same way they do today. It's very hard to see any change in how people create and change the passwords today compared to 10 years ago.
Right.
So instead of complaining about the end users, I'm starting to complain even more now about the service providers, especially those that haven't improved their password handling strategy over the last 10 years, because it's a new world when it comes to password cracking. And if you haven't updated, if you haven't been watching class on internet security and password security for the last 10 years, then you really need to consider what you should do for the future or risk the consequences.
Right, right. I very much agree. I very much agree. Per, thank you so much. We'll be watching what comes out of Passwords 12 very, very closely. It's a great conference, and it's one of the few, if not the only one in the world, I think, that just focuses on the issue of security and passwords. Is that correct?
The only one. Yeah,
The
I've been
only one.
Googling, and nobody have ever done a conference only about passwords and PIN codes before.
Great. Per, thank you so much. Per Thorsheim is the host of Passwords 12 in Oslo, Norway. It's going on today through Wednesday, and he took some time out late in the evening there, Norway time, to speak with Security Ledger. Per, thank you so much, and good best of luck with the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.